So today we're talking about reparenting. And this actually came out of a suggestion from you guys in my previous talk about parenting, about whether or not these ideas about parenting could be applied to ourselves. And this is important whether we've had children or we have children or we've never had children or that's not part of our world. Because the bottom line is we're all still growing. You know, we may be decades in, but if we're alive, we're still growing. And we're actually just as vulnerable as that 5-year-old self we once were. And this is really valuable. It's really important to understand that we may look big and strong and we may look like we're responsible and we're doing all the right things, but we really are a vulnerable child inside till the day we die, right? It's a blessing. You know, it's one of the interesting things even about teaching Tantra and learning how to be vulnerable with other people. Because we have such walls up, we have such protection up to the world, to others. And it's often really hard to learn how to break that down or to bring that down so we can actually connect with others. And I remember when I was writing Tantric Intimacy, I was reading the book of Joy, which is a conversation between the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu, which is so entertaining, honestly. Like, talk about two really funny, humble, lovely humans having a conversation. And Desmond Tutu said, I love when a quote just disappears out of my brain. Basically, he said something to the effect that if we had any idea how fragile we actually are, how fragile life actually is, we would act so differently. He said, you know, every single one of us is one phone call away from our whole life changing. We are one diagnosis, one something, and everything we thought we were stressing about an hour ago disappears. And that really, really, really struck me, because imagine for a moment that we actually realized that, like, part of honoring and reparenting our inner child is honoring that that is our reality. We really are sensitive beings. We really are. Even if we seem really angry and protective and sarcastic and pushing people away, it's because we have a gentle inner self. Right? It's kind of like the angrier someone is, the more they push you away, you know how deeply hurt they are inside. Right? It's because that inner child doesn't go away. We don't suddenly become adults. Like it's not real. We are always, hopefully, that gentle, vulnerable soul. Right? So that's why this reparenting idea is so important, and it's so important to keep it in the present. Because some of the reparenting does come from actually, and we'll talk about this, kind of almost going back in time and redoing some scenes from our life so that today we're able to be lighter, we're able to be more loving, we're able to be kinder to self and others. But it's not all about going back in time. Some things have nothing to do with our childhood. Some things have nothing to do with what happened with our parents. So the first time I ever had an experience with this was during the story of the breast lumps. Back in 1999, and I was sick with lumps in my breasts. It's a story in my book, What If You Could Skip the Cancer? So this was obviously before I wrote the book. And what happened, and this didn't even get in the book because I didn't know how to describe it. I didn't know what happened, and I don't know, it never got in the book. But what happened was, so at the end, I had these lumps in my left breast and they were moving out of my body. And by this time in the story I'm going to tell, the lumps were probably, there was only one lump left, and it was about maybe like 3/4 of an inch out, sticking out of my skin just below like my nipple, and it was just sticking out, and I was in agony, like sheer agony, like just I had electrical shocks flowing through my body, but it was just this constant prayer, like, what am I supposed to do next? What do I do next? And the answer was always, I don't know what the answer was, but it was always whatever the next step was, whatever the next step was. And I just had to keep trusting. That was my walk of faith, that I had to keep trusting. And then one day, my friend, who I talk about a lot on here, and my friend that also comes to the light language with me, if you guys ever choose to join me there. But she, her face came into my mind. So I called her up and I said, hey, I think I'm supposed to come over. And she's like, yeah, sure, come on over. I've got friends coming over, making dinner, blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay. So I went over and I was a mess. Like, I was literally so inside myself. I was barely human. I don't know whether it was the pain. I don't know what was going on. So I sort of sat in the corner. She lived in a log cabin in the woods. I mean, she really was personifying my friend, the witch doctor thing at the time. And I went and I sat in the corner while her friends sort of cooked and talked and chatted about all kinds of things. And they were really funky people, right? Like, they were really into alternative stuff and dowsing and spiritual stuff that I was really new to all of that. Anyway, I'm sitting there and I'm kind of just zoning out. And then her friend walks over to me and she just sort of looks at me. You know that way that psychic people do? They just sort of stare into your eyes going, right? And so she's looking at me and she says, you sent your inner child away because it wasn't safe. And I'd never had anyone talk to me like that. I wasn't accustomed to this world. And a lot has changed in over 20 years. And I just sort of stared at her. And she said, do you want to bring her back? And I just kept staring at her because I didn't know what she was talking about, right? I didn't even know what that meant. So I said, I don't know. And she said, if you bring her back, you have to protect her. Are you willing to protect her? She said, you've been kind of just throwing her to the wolves. Like, are you actually going to protect her like you would a child? And I realized in that moment, I had never done that for me. I was Superwoman. I was strong. I could do anything. Everyone depended on me. I never questioned whether or not I'm not weak. I can do anything. And so I agreed to everything all the time. I just never said no to anybody. I put up with nonsense from people. But because I have always had this sort of thing inside that said, I have to be stoic, I have to be calm, I have to seem, I don't know, enlightened or whatever we want to call it. I must always be that calm self. I should have screamed and yelled at people. I should have told people just to bugger right off, but I didn't. I always just sort of took it and just kept the peace and, oh, well, they've just got issues. And, well, what was my inner child doing all that time? Suffering. She was just being thrown to the wolves every time, and I was really aware of this. Like, when this woman asked me this, I thought, wow, I've never protected her. Not in relationships, not in life, not in work, not ever. She was always the sacrificial lamb. And so I really had to think about it. Like, I had to really sit there and go, maybe she should stay away. Like if I'm not willing to take care of her, then maybe she's where she belongs. Maybe she needs to stay safe somewhere. So then eventually I did look at her and I said, okay, I want to bring her back. And she said, okay, picture a place in your heart where she wants to be. And instantly this vision of an old library came up. Like this old library filled with books with this big wingback chair. And that's the vision that came into my mind. And of course, so instantly I start arguing with the vision, right? Like that can't be right. It's like, what little girl wants to sit in a stinky old library, And I kept arguing and trying to find other places for her to go. But the vision just kept coming back to this big wingback chair in this big library filled with books. So finally I said, okay, I've got this spot. And she said, now, she's free to come and go as she wants. But if she goes out, you have to protect her. Are you willing to? And I'm like, okay. And I don't know. I closed my eyes. She did something. I don't know what she did. And bam, there I was. This little 7-year-old girl with a Dorothy Hamill, haircut. Literally what I looked like when I was 7, sitting on this big wingback chair. And she was just happy as anything. And so she was back. And there was a lot about that again, it took me a long time to unpack it. And I think I'm still unpacking it today. I think that's maybe why I've never written about it or talked about it, because I think I'm still learning how to really honor my inner child. But one thing that was really interesting to me about it at the time was how much I fought where my inner child wanted to live. Like my inner child wanted to read. She wanted peace and quiet. She wanted dusty old libraries. And it's like my brain had this other idea for myself. My brain had this, no, Katrina, this is what your life should be like. You should be fun. You should be gregarious. You should be this. You should be that. You're not just some person that wants to sit in a library and read books. I really am someone who just wants to sit in a library and read books. I do like to dance and stuff once in a while, but that actually is my inner child. It's almost like I didn't accept her for who she was, right? Like, so you imagine right now where you are and you actually connect with your inner child in this moment. Do you accept them? Like, do you actually love them for who they are? Whatever that is. Whatever your version of a little kid in a library. It's an interesting question because I couldn't believe it. Like it's almost like today I'm still trying to get back to that girl in the library. I'm still trying to honor that truth about myself. It's almost like our inner child is our soul. Like it really is who we are. And then the world comes along and tells us we're supposed to be this, we're supposed to be that. It's like, so my sun sign is Virgo. And at some point in my childhood, I read a coffee mug that said, Virgos make great bus drivers and tend to fall asleep during sex. That was like this reverse curse for me. It's like it got into my mind at a very young age, and I decided, well, that was never going to be me. I was never going to be some boring person, and and I don't know what began my rebellion as a teenager or what have you. Who knows? Maybe a million things, right? Whole other story time. But I don't know. At some point, I rejected who I really was. I rejected that inner child. And that's important to ponder, So on this protection thing, right? Am I honest? If someone says something to me that's unkind, do I walk away? Do I allow it? Do I keep my child there, taking the abuse of this strange, angry person standing in front of me? Whether it's a family member or a partner or a boss or a neighbor or some random person on the street? Am I really going to put my child up as a shield in front of myself? No. I'm going to walk away. Hey, you can't walk away? Yeah, I can. Bye. Right? If I was to protect my own children, I'm like a mother bear. Like, you just watch out. Like in the land of when I am the least I remember one time I had foster kids, and they had to go to court for the abuse that they had gone through. And there was a bunch of drama going on in the courthouse, people wanting to see them and all this stuff. And someone, I don't know, I think it was the caseworker or something who we've been working with. And of course, I am actually quite a calm person. I don't normally get upset. It's, I don't know, just not my nature. But whatever was going on, I don't even remember the story anymore, but something was going on. Some drama was playing out. And I got so angry and so protective of the kids that were staying with me. And she just looked at me. She says, you literally grew like 2 sizes. You became this huge mother bear. Like, she goes, if my eyes didn't deceive me, you actually became this 300-pound mother bear that was like, like, just imagine if we were that strong for ourselves. For that truly fragile, vulnerable soul. And none of fragile and vulnerable aren't weaknesses. This is a good thing. It's good to be who we really are, right? Imagine if we were that protective and we never put ourselves in those positions. That's a real promise to self. Like, if we're going to reparent ourselves, that's our promise to self that says, no, I don't put up with any nonsense. I only, we've talked before about expecting good behavior. I expect you to be kind to me, period, or I walk away. In the same way that I would expect you to be kind to my children, or we're gone. It's exactly the same. I am a child. I'm a 51-year-old child. Right? I have all the same sensitivities, and my heart can be broken, right? And I can become frightened, and I can feel abandoned. I'm all the same inside, no matter how much we pretend we're all grown up, right? So that's a real decision to make. Do I protect my child? Do I protect my inner child right now? Right? The second thing is to really care for our child, right? To really care for who we are. And like, what does that mean? What does it mean to actually care for self? Well, the number one thing, so imagine the masculine feminine dynamic, right? In the first one, the masculine is the protector and the feminine is the vulnerable. Right? And again, it's not a weakness. It's a reality. Like, right? And in this instance, in the caring, the masculine is the giving and the feminine is receiving. So how do we know what our inner child needs? How do we know what to give to them? We listen. What is our inner child saying? What do they desire? What are they afraid of? What do they want? It's a very interesting exercise to sit in meditation with yourself, with a journal, however it works, And you can do it however you want. For me, my inner child sits kind of, I know you can't see my hands, but it's sort of like, it's like they're sitting inside of me, right in my pelvis. That's where my little inner girl lives. And she's just sitting there. Like she's kind of like sitting, going along for the ride. She's just sort of walking along. Her eyes are kind of looking out somewhere between my breasts and my belly button. Like she's just kind of looking around like this. So maybe your inner child is in you. Or maybe you imagine them sitting on a chair beside you, or you're sitting on the floor with them and you're chatting, or whatever it is. But to just listen. That's all we really want as a child. We just want our parents to see us and to consider us and to listen to us and to know that we matter. And this is a really big deal. You know, when I was in Sicily a couple years ago, I wrote about this in my book, You Don't Have to Eat the Eyeballs. And I had a total breakdown. Like I traveled for a few years, up until the lockdowns. Just all I own is a backpack. I gave everything away and I just traveled the world. And so this is quite a jostling of your soul and spirit, always sort of living in different places and different languages. And I felt really called to do it, and I'm so thankful and may do it again. But talk about always having to find your center, no matter where you are, no matter what's going on. And I don't know, by the time I got to Sicily, I think I was sort of vulnerable enough to hear a deep truth. You know what I mean? Like I think I'd sort of been thrown from pillar to post enough. And again, you're always holding your own. I'm holding my own. I'm fine. I'm responsible. I can do it. I can do it. And maybe it was because the family I stayed with was so loving. And I was staying on a lemon farm in Sicily, helping one of the girls with their English. And I don't know, maybe I just felt safe enough, or I'd slept in the same bed long enough or something. But wow, did I ever come to a place, I was actually really struggling with the Sicilian yelling, always yelling, right? I couldn't adjust to the constant screaming. Nice people, but there was just this real culture almost of yelling all the time and being angry. And it broke me. And I remember one day lying on my bed, just crying, just sobbing, just like, I don't know how to get out of this. Like I just could not get out of this space. And I don't even remember the whole story anymore. That's the great thing of when we actually resolve things, the stories disappear. They just disappear. But what I do remember in the context of this talk is that I laid there and suddenly I could feel my inner child. It was really weird. I actually went through this, I can't explain it, but it's like I was lying there and all of a sudden my whole body started shaking and I got really, really hot, and it lasted for a couple hours, and I was just shaking with it, and I was lying there thinking, what is this? And all of a sudden my inner child was inside of me. She was just sitting there looking around. And she's been there ever since. Because I think she must have gone away again. After the first story, I think I stopped protecting her or stopped listening. I think life must have come in again. Because all of a sudden, she was there in a really visceral way, almost like she was actually connected into my bloodstream. And from there on, I really honored her. Like it actually was like I had a child strapped to me all the time. And if anyone did anything, I was like, hey, back off, right? And when she said something, I listened. It's like almost like I couldn't listen. I couldn't not listen. I couldn't drown her out anymore. I couldn't pretend she didn't exist anymore. And that's interesting, right? To sit, in your own life right now and just simply, whether it's a journal question or not, to say, what's my inner child telling me? What do they want? What do they wish I would do? What would make their life happy? What would make them feel safe? What would make them feel loved? Right? That's what we would do as a parent. What do you need? What's going on inside? Why are you acting like this? Tell me. I'm here to help. That's my job. I'm your mom. I'm here to help. Imagine looking at ourselves like that, right? There was a time when I was in Greece, shortly after Sicily, that I was seeing a man, and I'd met him on Tinder and whatever, right? Little Greek Tinder adventure. But there was something amuck, and it's a longer story. I touched on this guy a couple days ago when I talked about people who are mean, and you just sort of go, what you saying that for? That's weird, right? But it was that guy. Anyway, I couldn't get rid of him. And he was actually quite scary. He was scaring me, to be honest. I'm quite happy to be here today, because I wasn't quite sure I was getting out of that one. And I remember at one point he kept saying, come to Athens with me, come to Athens with me. And I was like, I don't want to come to Athens. But I wasn't being forceful. Like I am such a people pleaser still. Like I still have this, I don't have a bitch thing in me. I don't have that. I kind of need to develop it. I don't have that thing. And I just couldn't convince him to leave and go away and stop, just go. And I prayed about it. And I saw my inner child literally with her hands against the side of his car, like almost like she was getting pushed in. And she was like screaming, going, no, 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 no. And that's what made me not get in the car, right? It was that awareness of what my inner child was doing at that time. And she was saying, please don't, please don't, please don't, please don't. And that gave me the strength, it gave me the center, it gave me the something to find the words to get rid of him. Like our inner child isn't just this weak, vulnerable baby. There's great wisdom. It's almost like, you know how they talk about that we come in, knowing all kinds of things, and then it's sort of systematized out of us because we become so civilized. I think our inner children are so wise, and when we really listen, they have great answers for us. To actually look at our inner children as our little wise one inside. They're not just babies; they're incredibly wise, right? So the last thing I want to mention about parenting, reparenting, and connecting with our inner child is fun and lightness of being. Because we can work a lot. And if we're not working, we can be chewing on stuff and worrying about that and wondering if this is ever going to happen. And is that going to work out? And am I going to ever solve that? Or whatever. And it's like, okay, every so often we have to adult, right? Every so often we can ponder things and we can be introspective and we can wonder and we can plan and we can be responsible. But is that really the only reason we're here on this planet? Like, is that really why we're breathing and we're capable of so much joy and fun and pleasure? Like, are we actually doing any of it? You know, and we actually look inside and we say, what would my inner child want to do right now? Right? Sometimes my inner child just wants to go for a walk without a phone, without a book, without anything. She just wants to go for a walk, barefoot, see where we end up. No plan, no, I'm going to make sure it's 5K, none of that. Just whatever. Maybe she wants to just go and lay on the grass and stare at the sky for no particular amount of time, not planned. Like, it's almost like when we actually listen to our child, we live. Like, our soul is alive. We're not just automatons. We're not just machines. We're going through the motions and, oh, well, it's this time now. It's this time now. Now I've got to do this. And what about the money? And what about this? I don't know. You know, it's that John Lennon saying that he had a teacher once say to him, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he said, happy. And the teacher said, I don't think you understand the question. And he says, I don't think you understand life. That's our inner child, connecting us with the true lightness of being that we're meant to have. Are we meant to contribute to the village? For sure. Everybody's got to eat, so let's make sure we've got food and shelter. Everyone contributes. That's just part of living together. But are we having any fun? You know, is this really... I remember back in, shortly after the breast lumps and all that, and after I was healed, so we were dairy farmers. And so we worked really long hours. And my husband had always been a farmer. He was raised on a farm. He didn't know anything different. And so, of course, when we got married, obviously we became farmers. But then after I was sick, and of course my mom had died like 4 years before I was sick, and my husband was really, really close to her. Like, she was just this everybody's mama kind of person, right? And so he was really broken losing her. And then how close I came to dying really threw him. And afterwards he just said, there's got to be an easier way to put food on the table. He says, in the end, he says, you know, we're working 16, 17 hours a day, and all we have is food and shelter. What are we doing? Like, it really threw him into this place of, when are we living? You know, and there's nothing like a brush with death to remind us that we really aren't just here for the paycheck, right? And we actually put the farm for sale. And it didn't go because hoof and mouth hit Europe and farms weren't getting bought, but it was a huge deal. And so this reconnection with our inner child is so valuable, right? It's so valuable that we actually listen, that we actually have fun in life, that we have strong, healthy boundaries, you know? The other interesting thing to ponder, and again, I kind of give this to you to go away with more than anything, because sometimes when we think about our inner child, sometimes we think about it kind of negatively or positively. Sometimes we think about a hurt little person, a little girl in my case. Sometimes we think about an angry teenager. Right? Like, I've heard people say, oh, well, this is inner child stuff. This is my angry teenager talking. This is interesting to ponder, you know, to sort of ask yourself, if I tune in with my inner child, how old are they? And then ask yourself, what happened at that time of life? What happened? You know, let's say you're stuck at a teenager and an angry one. What happened? what happened then? When did the disconnect have to happen? Right? It's just an interesting introspection. It's not so much about reparenting as much as just simply honoring whatever. It's a clue, right? It's a clue to something that might be causing something amuck today, right? And we can always go back to that time. There, imagining, there is no, the time and space continuum is a construct in our mind, right? So that moment in time where you got stuck, maybe you were abused, maybe something happened, maybe whatever, something happened. You can visit that time right now. In the infinite space, imagine as human beings, we're both infinite and we are also in this time-space continuum. So when we go into meditation, we enter that infinite field, the oneness, and we return to that moment. And maybe we make a new choice. We rewrite it. But only every one of us will have a different story there, where we got stuck, where something went amok, where we lost connection with that soul, that inner self. Just something to mention. In my excavation to find my inner children, they got stuck, left behind. I can see them. But I can see that they can't see me yet, like I'm a ghost in the room. I'm just starting to let them see me, to trust that I feel. It's so funny when you say that. I feel like, what if you touched them? What if you embrace them? You know what I mean? What if it's not just seeing? What if it's what if we touch them? What if we hold them? What if we bring them close? I did a group meditation a few weeks ago and I got to give my inner child such a big hug. We have so much to talk about. That's awesome. Yeah. In my book, it was funny. I literally, when I was having this sort of meltdown in Sicily about my inner child, I realized I felt incredible guilt because of all the times I'd ignored her. And I actually wrote this whole thing out. I don't have a copy of my book here, but I wrote this whole thing out saying how sorry I was. I'm sorry for not listening. I'm sorry for making you do things you didn't want to do. I'm sorry for letting society define what we're supposed to be doing and what we're supposed to look like and what we're supposed to, I'm sorry for having sex when you didn't want to. I'm sorry for not listening. I'm sorry. There was this huge, long thing about, and it was real guilt. And it's hard to feel guilt, right? It's really, we don't want to feel guilt. And I think we definitely don't want to feel guilt for what we've done to ourselves, right? And again, it still comes around to which book was the story? You don't have to eat the eyeballs. It's funny, right? The whole point of that book, you don't have to eat the eyeballs. It came from a story, a true story when I was traveling. And I was faced with having to eat fish eyeballs, which, I am such a boring eater, you have no idea. So the idea of having to eat fish eyeballs just killed me. And so that book is about getting over that people-pleasing thing. Oh, thanks, Violetta. It was so beautiful.
Yeah.
Why are we all so broken? I wonder what went wrong with us, this species. What is this struggle? It is that is the question. It's such an important question. And there's a lot of theories about it. There's a lot of theories on many levels, right? There's ideas about, what caused the disconnect. To be completely woo-woo about it, some people go all the way back to Atlantis. that this was the great disconnect from the masculine and feminine. Some put it to spiritual matters of wars for the souls. Some people put it to, we can go lower and look at the church and all these different things, but who knows? I don't know. All we know is that our consciousness is rising right now so that we can heal it. Like we can see it now. We can kind of rise above ourselves and kind of look and say, okay, I'm not a slave to that any longer. I now can treat myself differently. I now can walk differently. Like even 10 years ago, for me to say no to someone, and really clearly no. The whole thing that no is a full sentence, or no is a complete sentence. And that's it. Well, how come? Doesn't matter. The answer is no. That's a big deal. And it's interesting because historically I would have said, oh, well, they deserve an explanation. But then today, from this different vantage point, this different consciousness, I look at it and I think, why would they want me to go against my truth? What's that all about? The question isn't why am I saying no? The question is, why is my answer not good enough? Like, why is my soul's path, why are you questioning my soul's path? Right? It's, I don't know, it just, the whole thing has changed. Right? Why would we not listen? We're not conditioned to trust ourselves. We are conditioned to not trust selves. I know, right? Really, our whole system is designed this way. And again, I don't mean why, I don't know. I personally think it comes from above the system. But we're trained in school to simply do as we're told. What you think doesn't matter. We're trained historically in home that no, children are meant to be seen and not heard. And again, there's lots of different schools that are different, lots of different homes that are different, lots of different spiritual communities that are different. But that pattern is pretty across the board. But it's 2021. And every day, we began our conversation today talking about the wild emotions flying around. One day we're elated, one day we're teary, one day we're who knows what's going on. And I really think this is happening so that we can kind of rise above the drama that we've been raised in, the fears that we've been raised in, all the stories that we've told a million times, and we're actually being asked to get out of that mess and go and look at it from a different perspective, And I think that's this whole joy of reparenting, because it's a gentle path. Because we're dealing with our most vulnerable self, our inner child, our most fragile self. Right? And it's kind of like I always remember my son used to be, well, both my kids, neither of my kids like to have no said to them. I don't think any kids like to have no said to them. But my kids had really, really strong lungs. And man, when they screamed, my husband would hear it in the barn. And normally it was just, they were just mad because they didn't get their way. And I remember my son specifically, I would pick him up, and he's just flailing because he didn't get the cookie or something, right? And he's just mad as all get out. And I'd pick him up and I'd walk over to the stairs with him and we would sit on the stairs and he'd just, be like, how kids would sort of, and they kind of like pin themselves to the stairs and they kind of like crawl all over, like, and kind of flail on it. And I would just sit there and watch him. Right? He's mad. And the truth is, as a full-grown adult, honestly, I hate having no said to me too. I don't deal well with rejection. I don't deal well with not getting my way. I want what I want. I do. So I get it. You know what I mean? It's not like, as his parent, I get it. In that moment, he didn't get the cookie. But I do understand what he's going through, so I'm not going to tell him not to feel it. But he's not allowed to scream and yell and grab at my legs and do all that. So we just sit on the stairs until it's over. Sometimes that's like us now. It's like, that's sort of an extreme example, but having the consciousness to just hold space for ourselves. And if we're freaking out about something, then let us freak out. And if we're sad about something, then let us be sad. And if we're angry at our sister because then let them be angry. Like that. There's a weird pattern in the past of quietening our soul. Right? Don't be angry. Don't be sad. Don't be this. Don't be that. And it's like, why? Why can't we feel anything? So again, that's where a lot of this comes, is just starting now, and just I think hearing real loving parenting stories are fodder for imaging, reparenting my inner children. But it's interesting because I parented my children very differently than I treat my own inner child. You know what I mean? So it's interesting how it's almost like how you can be really, really kind to others and then come home and just beat yourself up about something. It's a lot like that. So sometimes I have to listen to my own parenting stories. Because it's easy to love others sometimes, but it's so easy to be judgmental of self. It's just so easy. I think that's the key. I think it's a balance of going back in time and looking at the points that were difficult. But really, the number one thing is you just start today. Right? We just start today. And we protect, and we're kind, and we remember to have fun. Well, thank you so much for being here. But I hope you have a wonderful day, a wonderful evening wherever you are. We'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.